All right, and I see Sonny's online there too, so good evening. All right, hi everybody. This is week 7, and this week we're really going to dive into the textbook and really start to use the information from the textbook and work through some of the stuff the author is telling us. And I'm really going to attempt to show you guys how to use the textbook and kind of give you some perspective about why we've worked so hard to get our own databases up and running. And Koivo here is volunteered to be my guinea pig for tonight, so I'm going to make him do a bunch of stuff. But before we really dig into really chapter 6 and mostly chapter 8 as far as the stuff we want to cover from the textbook, I've put the latest assignment out there, assignment 3 on Blackboard, and that is going to be focused on using Enterprise Manager Express, which we can see on the screen here. Koivo's already got open for his MyCDB1 or his root database. Now, we're going to use both the root database and the PDB databases for Enterprise Manager, and there's a little bit of configuration we have to do in order to make this work. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this, and then once you do this on your own database, then you'll be able to complete the assignment. So first thing I want to do, Koivo, is just have you click on the terminal window where we ran the listener control status. Yep. So you see here, Koivo has run his listener control status command, and if you look, you'll see that there is basically an application running at 1521, which is the listener listening for your actual database. And then on port 5500, we can also see that there's another really application running here. And this port 5500, if you look at Koivo's Firefox behind us here, is the port with which EM is running on. Now, the reason that we're checking to see what instances of Enterprise Manager might be running is because we actually need to set the port for our PDB database. So right now, Koivo, if you'll click on Firefox behind this window, you'll see that over in the very left-hand side, right underneath the big red oracle, it tells us that we're in MyCDB1. And that indicates that we're in our root database. And for assignment 3, you're going to be able to answer some of the questions that are on that assignment from here, but you're going to need to get an awful lot of stuff from your PDB1. So Koivo, go ahead and click on SequelDeveloper now, and let's take a look at some stuff that we can find in SequelDeveloper. So here in SequelDeveloper, Koivo's got his sys on MyCDB1, his root database, logged in. And then we're also logged into our pluggable database, the sys on MyPDB1. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go to our root database, our MyCDB1 tab. So click on that SequelDeveloper tab right to the left there, Koivo. Sys on MyCDB1.
Say that again.
Click on the other tab there in the editor, the sys on MyCDB1. Perfect. Now, what we've got here is a select statement. And this select statement, if you're not familiar with SQL, you're going to get pretty familiar with it here pretty quick. This select statement is all about telling us what pluggable databases are utilizing what ports at the moment. So, Koivo, if you just go ahead and click that little green play button, yeah, right there. Yep, click that. We'll see that this runs. And what it's showing us here is kind of the status of the pluggable databases on this root database. So when I say root database here, again, I'm talking about MyPDB1. And when I say pluggable database, I'm talking about the MyPDB1 and MyPDB2 on MyPDB1 there, we can see down below. And we can also see the PDB seed database, and this is just used by the system to create your pluggable databases whenever you decide you want to create a new one. Now we can see that MyPDB1 on MyPDB1 is open in read-write mode, so we ought to be able to utilize it, but we can see that there's no port assigned to it. So if we go Koivu to the sys on MyPDB1 on MyPDB1 SQL tab there, we have two different SQL statements here. So the first SQL statement will actually ask the system for the port that this pluggable database is currently using. So Koivu, if you highlight that top SQL statement there, and then when you get it highlighted, press the little green play button again, we can see that when we run this, we get nothing, right? It's basically telling us that we're not currently utilizing a port. So now what we want to do is actually set a port for this. And I've just sort of arbitrarily picked port 5504, but we can see that the next statement down, this exec statement, sets the port for this pluggable database. So Koivu, if you'll highlight that SQL statement and then press the play button. Now that's sort of another introduction here. We've actually just run some PL SQL code, which is the programming language, if you will, of the Oracle database. And now if we were to highlight that upper SQL statement again and run it one more time, we can see if this had any effect on it. So go ahead and highlight that upper one. And click play. And now we can see that port's set for this. And if we switch back to the sys on MyPDB1 SQL tab there, so yeah, Koivu, go ahead and switch to the other SQL tab there. Perfect. And if we run this statement one more time, now we can see that, hey, that port is actually set for this pluggable database. Now what this means is we ought to be able to use Enterprise Manager to access our pluggable database. So now, Koivu, if you'll go back to Firefox, what I want you to do is just copy the address in the URL in the address bar there, and let's open up a new tab by clicking that plus button right above the address. And go ahead and paste that in there. And then let's just backspace till you get to EM. And then after we do that, we're going to change that 5500 to 5504 or 5504. So, nope. Delete the 5504 you just put in there and then just arrow back to where you see the 5500. There you go. Now change that to a 4 and hit enter. Okay, so this you should expect to see every time because it's just unhappy about the fact that this is got a self-signed certificate with it. There's nothing to be concerned about here. Go ahead and click advanced, and then it's going to want you to add a security exception for this particular site. We're going to say confirm security exception, and now it should log us into Enterprise Manager. So when we logged into Enterprise Manager on the root database, we used our sys user. The great thing about that sys user is it has access to all of the pluggable databases as well. So Koivo, go ahead and just log in here with your sys user again. And then we're going to log in as sys, and we're also going to make sure to check that as sysdba checkbox there. All right, and so now what we'll see is, hey, we're logged into another instance of Enterprise Manager running on a different port. And if we look up in the top left-hand corner again, what we're going to see is that, hey, that's our pluggable database, not our root database that we're referring to. Now, another way that we can sort of get cued off by this is some of the different options that'll be available in the menus. So Koivo, if you could go ahead and maximize Firefox so we can see it a little better here. And then you'll see that there's a storage drop-down menu right about the middle of the page on the blue bar. And if you click that, what you see is we have table spaces. So go ahead and click those table spaces there. And now we can see that Enterprise Manager is actually showing us the table spaces that exist in our pluggable database. And Koivo, if you were to hit one of those plus signs on the left-hand edge of the table there, we'll also see the data files that are included in our table spaces. And we'll be coming back to this in a little bit here. But the great thing about Enterprise Manager is it gives you kind of a GUI interface that's a little easier to use to help you to manage the database and see what's going on with it. Now, Koivo, if you'll go up to and pick the root database tab for Firefox, the first Firefox tab we opened there. Yeah, perfect. Now, if you click the storage drop-down menu over here, we're going to see that we have a different selection here at the root level as opposed to the pluggable database level. And that's because with the root and pluggable databases, what used to be managed sort of in a singular place when we had only standalone instances in the previous version of the database has now been divided between the root and the pluggable database. And it's not necessarily all that important that you understand why that is right now, but just understand that it is, and that some of the things that you're looking for may actually be in your pluggable database. And in particular, table spaces are local to your pluggable databases, and this will be important as we move ahead. The other thing that we can see here, Koivo, if you click on security dropdown, as you can see, you can actually manage users and roles from here. So go ahead and click on users. All right, and now what we're going to see is we might start to recognize some of the things that we've seen in SequelDeveloper before, but certainly we can see an Apex user in here and an Apex public user, and we're familiar with that if we did assignment 2A there where we did the Apex install. And then there's a number of other users that are kind of default for the root database. Now, if we go ahead and click on our pluggable database tab in Firefox there, the other tab, yep, and we go over there and we look at security, and we select users. Hey, we're actually going to see a few of the same and some different users as well. So understand that that users can be kind of across the whole database, or they can be specific to only pluggable databases. And what's particularly nice about this as a database administrator with this kind of new architecture is it is possible to give a developer, for instance, and I would highly encourage you, if you become a database administrator, to be friendly to developers and be nice about giving them plenty of access to the database, because all developers should be using their database more than they do. But what you'll know with pluggable databases, you can actually give them full control of a pluggable database without sort of putting any of your really important stuff that a developer shouldn't be touching at risk, and or isolating other developer or other databases that may have a separate purposes from harm from that person using it. So these pluggable databases really give the developers an ability to do what they need to do to move their application development along without interrupting things that are other people might be doing, or ultimately breaking something else because they're trying to figure something out. So just be aware of that. And so for assignment 3, what you're going to do is you're going to spend time wandering around Enterprise Manager to answer the questions in it. And I'm kind of intentionally not going to show you very much about this. I'll leave it up to you guys to figure it out. Once you have set up that, once you've set up the HTTP port rule there, when you've assigned the port to your pluggable database, you should be able to log into both it and the root database via Enterprise Manager, and at that point you ought to be able to answer all of the questions in the test, quote unquote, that I put out there for assignment 3. So when you go into Blackboard, you will notice that I've for assignment 3 got like a test set up. Know that you can take that as many times as you want to, so don't feel like you have to have all the answers right first time through. You can pretty much keep taking it until you're happy with the grade you got. And hopefully everybody ends up with 100 on that. Okay, so we'll revisit Enterprise Manager in a little bit here, but we're actually going to shift gears from now, and we're going to actually take a pretty deep dive into some of the information that's in Chapter 6 and Chapter 8 of the textbook. So Koivo, if you could just minimize Firefox on your desktop there. Most of what we're going to be doing is going to be in SequelDeveloper from here forward. So go ahead and maximize SequelDeveloper for me. And one of the things that's going to be really important is you're going to want to, especially when we're dealing with storage and things such as that, you're probably going to want to use that DBA tab on the bottom left. So Koivo, let's go ahead and hit the plus sign down there, and let's get a connection set up for sys on my CDB1. That's perfect, so just say OK. And then let's set up another connection for our pluggable database. So go ahead and hit the plus sign one more time. Now hit that big green plus. Yep, and then on that drop-down menu, let's select the sys on my PDB1. Perfect. Go ahead and click that and say OK. And now on the left-hand side, if you just collapse that sys on my CDB1, yep, hit the minus sign right there. All right, so now we can see we've got these two connections set up on here. So if you scroll that down just a little bit, Koivo, one of the things you'll notice there is, hey, storage, that kind of looks familiar. So go ahead and expand that storage and scroll down again. And now what we see is, hey, here's some more stuff that kind of looks familiar. I think I'm going to saw some of this stuff in Enterprise Manager. Go ahead and expand the table spaces. All right, and scroll down. So now what we see is, hey, these are the same table spaces I saw in Enterprise Manager. And true statement, okay? So you'll find that there's going to be some overlap between all of these tool sets, and you can use them for different things. But you can do an awful lot from SequelDeveloper. So I'm a big fan of SequelDeveloper. There's other tools out there like Code, which are fantastic but cost money. You can do just about everything you need to do with SequelDeveloper if you're keeping up with the latest releases. And so the other thing I want you to do on the left-hand side there, Koivo, is just expand the Datafiles folder. There you go, perfect. And then if you can just scroll that bottom bar to the right, the bottom scroll bar. Look, if we kind of just observe that path right there, y'all might recognize that because you've been there before. Scroll back to the left-hand side. This is the locations that I had you guys take screenshots of during, I think it was our first and second assignment, and that I think was assignment 2. But this is really where the sort of marriage between the computer file system and the Oracle database happens, right? And chapter 6 starts to talk about storage, and we really start to dig into it. And what I'm going to do, Koivo, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a minute, but then I'm going to come back to you and have you share again. But I just want to show everybody some stuff from chapter 6 here.
He stopped sharing?
Yep, I stopped sharing, and now I'm gonna share a bunch of stuff from the textbook, and then I'll come back to here in just a second. All right, so what I've got here is chapter 6, and this is really where they dig into managing the database and storage structures. And they start to talk about these things like table spaces and data files and all that type of stuff. So if we click through here quick, kind of the very first thing that the author calls out here is this idea of how a database abstracts logical storage from physical storage, right? So it used to be way back in the day that application developers, when they needed to store data, would essentially create their own databases, or they would code to write their own stuff on a file system on a computer, right? And that was a total cluster because every application had to come up with its own system for organizing data. And then, you know, as people shifted in and out of jobs, other people had to try to understand that. And it was a really difficult thing to deal with. So what the database sought to do is give people a abstraction between the file system on any particular computer and the actual storage mechanism of the data, right? So what the database does is it exposes things logically, like tables in a database, and it says, hey, if you would like to write things into this table or read things from this table, go ahead. You can do that by connecting to the database, but you no longer have to be concerned at all about where any of this stuff is on the storage at the storage level, right? The database sits in between you and the storage, and makes it far easier for applications to use and store and share data, because the database exposes that data in a sort of common language called SQL that all applications can use, and then applications no longer have access to where the data is on the operating system, and therefore don't have to code for it. So databases are really kind of a big revolution in this sense, and you know, for a lot of people, that's all they do still today is just, you know, kind of parse data in and out. They're a lot more powerful than that, but as a database administrator, this relationship that's here in Chapter 6 is kind of important to understand. So if you look at the bottom right corner here, they're talking about the operating system block. Basically, all that is it's you know, two spots from point A to point B on the storage system of your OS, right? And it's of a certain size. And whenever you ask for data from your operating system, it's going to pass you back blocks of data that are the corresponding side of the operating system block. Inside of the Oracle database, it has sort of the same concept, right? It has blocks. There are chunks of space with which we can store data, and we store those blocks in groups essentially called extents. And then as you kind of move up through here, we have segments, which are really the objects inside of our data base, and then ultimately the table space, which is just sort of a grouping of all of this stuff. And inside of a table space is a data file, right? And this is the thing that we were just looking at. This is a physical file that resides on your computer. And segments, the objects inside of the database, are stored inside of data files. And you can see there's a many to many relationship there, and you know, you can see a one-to-many relationship as you go down through this diagram. So we could sit here and talk about like what all this means, but honestly, it just kind of gets confusing to me. And the best way I think to understand it is to actually begin to poke around at this stuff. So if you kind of work your way through the chapter, the author does a pretty good job of sort of explaining the basics of how everything works, and ultimately kind of works into some examples. And I think these are kind of the best way to go, because they help me understand things a lot better. So Koivo, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and ask you to go ahead and start sharing again. All right, so give me just a second here, and I'm going to start passing you some of the commands to make this go. All right, so one of the first things the author has us look at is this table called DBA segments, and he has us do this kind of group command. So Koivo, I'm just gonna IM this to you.
Okay.
And I'm going to want you to take that and put it in our in SequelDeveloper for our pluggable database. So yep, go ahead, click there, and then just go ahead, yep, hit enter a couple times after that, and then paste that in there. And then let's go ahead. Now, one of the things you'll find to be very handy here is you'll notice that there's a semicolon at each one of these lines. And there's actually a shortcut for executing SQL inside of SequelDeveloper. and as long as you have a semicolon after each one of your commands, it'll kind of work no matter how much stuff you have on the page there. So Koivu, you can actually press the control key down and hit enter, and it should just execute that SQL statement we have there. Okay, so now what the author is having us look at is the different type of segments that are in the database. And you might have heard me say the segments are kind of the objects in the database. And what this SQL statement does is it says, hey, let's look at the different types of segments stored in this DBA segments view, and let's just count how many of them there are. And so if we look at that list there, we can see that there we have the different segment types that are part of the database, and the author calls out, and then we have the counts for each row. So how many individual segments there are of these different types. And the ones that we'll probably be most primarily concerned with are table and index. And the author kind of talks a lot about putting these in the order that you'll pay attention to them, and that's kind of what he calls out very first thing. So one of the things I want to show you guys is as you're going through and you're seeing maybe all the SQL that the author is calling out in the book, if you have the Kindle version like me, for whatever reason, they make it super difficult to copy this stuff out. And a lot of the statements are just kind of based on you know, one or two views, and it sure would be nice if we just had something that would kind of automatically create that SQL for us. And the fact of the matter is we do. So Koivu, go ahead and hit enter 2 more times for me. And then what I want you to do is go up to the Tools menu, and I want you to select Preferences. So Preferences is at the very bottom. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change one of the preferences. Go ahead and click that on our SequelDeveloper here. So no, a lot of the ways that SequelDeveloper behaves is kind of configurable, and you're more than welcome to wander through this thing and figure out if there's changes you might want to make to some of these settings. And I would say that probably inevitably over time, if you do this at all, you will end up changing some of the settings in here to just sort of make this thing behave the way that you want it to. So if you'll go ahead and expand the database plus sign on the left-hand side there. So yeah, go right up there. All right. And so this shows us sort of all sorts of behavior that we can configure inside of the editor. What we're particularly interested in the moment, though, is the object viewer. So if you'll go down there and click on that object viewer, which is probably, there you go, right there. Yep, that's the one. All right. So now what we see here in the preferences on the right-hand side is kind of an annoying function, if you ask me, which it says open object on single click. And what that means, if we were to click a table, it'll kind of automatically call up this editor for the table. And that's kind of inconvenient. So I always suggest to people to turn that off. So right there where you see that checkbox with a check in it, uncheck that, and then say OK there on the bottom right. All right, so now what I want to show you is if we look over on the left-hand side and we look at the views that are available there under sys on my PDB1, on my CDB1, underneath our connections, there is a folder that says views, and we can expand that. And now what we'll see is, hey, there's because we're logged in as the system user, there is just a pile of views in here that are used for all sorts of things. that you can spend a life learning about. But what we're going to be kind of messing around with today is a lot of the ones that are kind of prefaced with DBA. So if you right-click on that views folder there, Koivo, right-click on that, it will give you the ability to apply filter. So we want to click apply filter. We're actually going to make it so we can filter this down a little bit. So if you'll type DBA %, and click OK, you'll see now that, hey, we cut this down to just a list of the stuff that's prefaced with DBA. And now if we scroll down through this list a little bit, we ought to actually find the DBA segments view that we just used. So go ahead and scroll down a little bit there. And you may want to just sort of click up and above that down arrow a little bit. You can jump a little faster down the list. There you go. So you can imagine that there is an ungodly number of these things. What do they all mean? And I will leave it to you to figure out what all of those are if you're interested. But understand that, hey, when they start to talk about this stuff in a lot of the reference material that you're going to find in books and documentation and whatnot, you can come in here and actually look at this stuff inside of your database. And I think it makes it a lot easier to understand the database when you begin to do just that. You start to poke and prod at it, and it starts to make sense. So, okay, we see DBA segments there. Now, because we turned the single click off, if we just click on that thing, like left click on it, we can actually drag the whole thing over to our SQL window there. So go ahead and just drag over to the right, Koivo, and try to land that thing right below our select statement and let go of it. And now what you see is, hey, there's this super handy little window that pops up and says, hey, what do you want to do here? Do you want me to just put the object name on there? Do you want me to create an insert statement, a delete statement, an update statement? And what we really want is for it to create a select statement. So go ahead and click apply. I don't know if you've kind of figured out yet, but I'm not a fan of doing things that I don't have to. And so right there, the system just went ahead and wrote a SQL statement that is the equivalent of select star from DBA segments, except they used all the individual field names here for us. So now, Koivo, if you'll go ahead and actually just run that statement by placing your cursor really right there at the end of the statement, that'd be fine. And go ahead and use that. You can either use Control Enter or you can use the play button. And now what we see is, hey, look at this. I see a bunch of segments. So that's these segments are the sort of chunks of the actual objects that are in our database. And now we're beginning to see that we can actually hunt these things down, right? So what's interesting is, okay, well, we know that we saw DBA segments, and then we know that we saw DBA extents, or we saw extents. I wonder if there's a DBA extents table. So Koivo, go ahead and just hit enter a couple times to give ourselves space here. And then over on the left-hand side, I just want you to scroll up to DBA extents. So, yep, and you got to go all the way up to E. So, yeah, take the fast lane. All right, and looky there. Lo and behold, there is a table called DBA extents. So now go ahead and drag that over. and drop it on the, yep. And we're going to go ahead and just take a select statement and apply, and it will write the SQL for us, allowing us to be lazy, and we like that. And now we're going to go ahead and run that particular statement. All right. So now what we can kind of see is, hey, in this extents table, it lists a whole bunch of segments as well. And if we look to the, if we kind of follow over to the right, looking at the various columns here in these results, we can see we have an owner, which you can also read as a user. We have a segment name, so we know when we create tables and indexes, stuff like that, that we're going to name them. We see a table space name, so we know that that relationship is there as well. We're going to learn some more about table spaces. And then we see an extent ID and a file ID. And then we also see things like blocks. So really, we're beginning to see that all of these things that they're mentioning in Chapter 6 can actually see the physical representation of this stuff on the database. Now, if we wanted to, and of course we do, we can actually go and look for the data files that are related to the particular extents that we're looking at, which means we can see what data files actually contain the objects that are in our database. So go ahead and hit enter a couple of times again. And now this time I want you to look for a file or for a view on the left-hand side called DBA data files. So it should just be maybe a few views up the way. And just a little bit farther. We're looking for DBA data files. And looky there it is. So now if we go ahead and drag this table on and go ahead and click apply. Now this is where we kind of run into an interesting thing here, right? Because if what we need to do is actually give this statement a file ID to actually locate where that particular file is here. So just looking at the results from the last statement we ran, we can see that we have this segment name called I_parameter1, and it is a segment type of index, and it's in the system table space, and it has an extent ID of 0 and a file ID of 8. So what we can do with our DBA data files is actually apply a parameter to it, or a constraint, what's known as a where clause. So Koivo, what I want you to do is just arrow to the left side of that semicolon that's there on the screen. So just go over one space. Oh, actually go to the end of the DBA data files. Yeah, right there. Go ahead and hit enter. All right. Now I want you to type the word where, space, and then it's going to be file _ ID. So we're saying, and then _ ID, and you can see that the interface is actually trying to autocomplete for you, which is nice. And then we're going to hit space, and we're going to use what's called an in clause, just because it'll be handy for us as we go along. And just if you're not familiar with SQL, equals is sort of setting it equal to one value, and in says we'd like to go fetch all of these values in this list we're going to give you. So go ahead and type the word in and space, just a space, and then give me an open parentheses. And then we're going to use the file ID of 8. So the number 8. Nope, just the number 8. Yep, and then close parentheses. All right, so now go ahead and either hit Control Enter or the play button up top to run this statement. And now what we can see is, hey, that object that is in my database actually resides in this database, this data file on my system. And we could easily go out there and find that system01.dbf. So now we've kind of stitched the whole thing together, right? We've looked at objects, and then we figured out kind of what table spaces they're in, and we've then ultimately dug all the way down to the data files and been able to tie the whole thing together, right? So for me, this begins to make it a little bit easier to understand, but it's still kind of a little cloudy. And so, you know, one of the examples that I believe the author uses is to just have you create some objects and then kind of look at how it changes things as we go along. So one of the things to understand about data files is the database sort of automatically decides where stuff goes from a data file standpoint. Now, if we were to go back and look at our table spaces, we're going to find out that all of them right now are just using one data file. And so it's kind of hard to really envision like how you know, these data files are important if there's just one of them. So Koivo, over there on the left-hand side, I want you to go down and actually go to the DBA tab on the left-hand side and scroll down to the bottom again. Yep, right there. And so we can see that, hey, we've got this users table space over here. So if you go over to the left-hand side and just double-click that users table space. Yep, go ahead and click it. So here we see, hey, here's a whole bunch of information, right? We've got our table space name, the size of the block it is in, the initial extent or kind of group of blocks that are allocated on the file system when we created this thing, and then other stuff around you know, the maximum size and all that type of thing of this table space. Now go ahead and click over there for that users tab on the right hand side there. Go ahead and click the data files. So go up to where your tabs are for sys on MyCDB1. Over on the right hand side there in the big white area. See where it says users in the sort of top middle?
No.
Yeah, move your mouse about 6 inches to the right. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, now go straight up. All right, keep going, keep going, keep going. And then you can see when you get to the top, there's another set of tabs here. And I want you to click on that Data Files tab, which is right above that Actions button. There you go, perfect. Click on that. And now we can see, hey, here are the data files that are associated with this table space. And then if you just keep going to the right, click on that Free Space tab. we can see the amount of space that is available in this table space. And then if you click on the Objects tab, we can see the objects that are in this table space. Now, let's take a look at this. What do we got here? Well, we've got some tables and we've got some indexes, right? And hey, we recognize those. Those were extents. We saw those things, or I'm sorry, those were segments. We saw those things in the database. And so now we're kind of getting a sense of how this whole thing is beginning to tie together. If you click on the usage chart there, the next tab over, you can see it'll show us a little view of, you know, basically how used this particular table space is. And essentially it's saying, hey, there's this Scott user, whoever this dude is, and he's using 100% of this table space. And then the last tab is the SQL tab, and I want you to click on that. Yep. All right, so now, if you're new to databases and new to creating all of this stuff, inside of SequelDeveloper, this SQL tab, which you will find most everywhere, will be your best friend, right? Because, hey, if Arthur asked me to create a table space and I don't have any freaking idea how to do that, hey, looky here. Here's a statement exactly how to do it. They're showing me exactly to do it, you know, exactly how to do this thing. So I'm not a big fan of, like, you know, reinventing the wheel. And I'm also a giant fan of taking advantage of Google and, you know, the collection of all human intelligence immediately available to us. And so if you have something that's already done it for you, that's not a bad place to start in a lot of cases. So as you are working through and trying to understand these objects, you're going to find out, like, wait a second, I can go into SequelDeveloper, see how it's been done already, and then I can kind of tweak that as I go along, right? So that's what we're gonna sort of do tonight. So do me a favor, Koivo, and you'll see that there is a blue pair of binoculars, maybe about 2 to 3 inches to your left, and then there's a little green guy next to it. And if you would hit the drop-down arrow, go up about 2 inches, up, 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 up. There you go. Click that drop-down right there. And what we're going to do is create a new SQL sheet here. So we want to do this for sys on my PDB1. So the second entry down there. There you go. Select that.
Click it.
Go ahead and click on it. So what we're doing here is just opening up another SQL worksheet for this this connection right here. So Koivo's got a whole pile of stuff in his first tab that says sys on my PDB1 on my CDB1. And now we're like, oh, geez, you know, that's a little too much stuff. I might want to, you know, get another workspace to do some new stuff on so I don't get it all confused. So we open another one. Now, one thing we might want to do is save some of the stuff we've done so far, right? So Koivo, if you'll go back to the sys on my PDB1 on my CDB1 tab you have there, 2 tabs to the right of the one we just created. Now just go up to the top left there and click the little save icon. So go, there you go, right there, perfect. Now click save, and you'll see that this is going to go right to the Oracle home on your desktop, which is frankly just not a bad place to put this stuff. It's pretty easy to find. And a lot of times the default names that SequelDeveloper will give these SQL files is pretty worthless. So I would say maybe just call this, you know, Tablespaces. because that's kind of where we started here. So you can call your files whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter. But we'll just give this one a name that will hopefully kind of just help us understand like what SQL we left there. One of the things you'll find over time as you do this stuff is you're going to want to collect SQL and keep it. And so, come up with a system for naming this stuff, and then, keep it so you don't have to redo things over and over and over and over. So after you got a name that you like for this thing, just go ahead and click Save. There you go, perfect. And now we can see up top there, it's renamed this tab, which also makes it quite a bit easier when we're just trying to navigate around and figure out, oh, where did we leave these 97 statements? Now we know kind of where we left them. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to click on the new SQL worksheet that we just created all the way over to the right there. The SQL worksheet. So yep, perfect. Next tab over.
Next what?
One more tab to the right. There you go. And okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to start. We're going to start messing with this thing, right? We kind of got this idea that we can make stuff, and we know we're the sysuser, so we know we can break this thing if we want to. So, why don't we give it a try? So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to create a table, and I'm going to make this pretty easy for you, Koivo. I'm just going to give this to you in the IM window again. So there's the create statement for the table. Go ahead and copy paste this in here. Are you stuck in your BNC viewer?
Yeah, I wanna see the chat stuff.
Okay. Let me try it again, see if I can get it to pop up for you.
This is it, right? Right there.
Oh, you got it?
That one?
All right, yeah, so paste it right here.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got here, right? We've got this create table and this sort of obscure Scott thing in front of it, and then dot new tab. So we're going to create a new tab with this C1, which really just is a column, and then it says date. That's the type of column it is. So it is a column designed to store date values. And then we got this thing that says segment creation immediate, which just basically means go ahead and allocate space for this object that we're creating. Now, one of the things you might be saying, well, what is this Scott thing, right? What is this? Well, that's actually a user on this database. It's just sort of an example user for the Oracle database. So Koivo, on the left-hand side, if you, in the connections window there, could scroll down below where all our views are. So yep, go there, and just scroll that all the way down. All the way down to the bottom. And okay, now what we see down here at the bottom is we know we're logged in as the sys user, but there's this tab that says other users. So if you could expand that folder there that says other users. Yep, right there, perfect. And then if you scroll down there, what we're gonna see, if we get to the bottom of this thing, is we're going to see a user named Scott. and user and schema are often used interchangeably in the database. You have to scroll up just a little bit. There he is right there. And so if you right click on Scott, we're going to see the ability to edit user. And if we click on that edit user, we're going to see that we actually have this ability to manage our users right here from SequelDeveloper. So we could change his password, we could change his default tablespace, we could do sort of all sorts of things to Scott if we choose to. And one of the things you'll notice there is it says the password is expired and the account is locked. So although this account exists on the database, you can't log in with that user because we've got them locked out. But that doesn't prevent us from creating objects on Scott's behalf, if you will. So go ahead and click close there. All right, and now let's run this command to create ourselves a new table. So go ahead and just hit the Control Enter, and we can say, hey, our new table has been created, right? Mm-hmm. So now we're kind of like, all right, well, you know, what does that mean? Or how does that affect our lives? So if we go back, Koibo, to your tablespaces.sql tab, get the SQL worksheet, tablespaces.sql. There you go. And now we scroll up back near the top on this thing again, and we find our DBA extents table. There we go. And so let's go ahead and scroll down just a little bit till we find our extents. Keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yep, we want to go to the next SQL statement down, I think, is the extents. Perfect. Now we're going to put a where clause on this so we don't get everything in the world again. So if you remember, if you go down past the table name, yep, go ahead and hit enter. And then I want you to type where and space and then owner. And then we're going to say equals. And we're going to put a single tick. And then we're going to type in Scott, all capitals. Yep. So we're going to want to put this inside single ticks or single parens.
What is single paren?
Right next to your enter key, there's the kind of the double tick and the single tick or parentheses. So it's the key right to the left of your enter. Yep. And put one at the head of that. Yep. You're going to want to put one in front of the S. Perfect. And then get rid of the extra one at the end. And there you go. And all these ticks mean, right, is we're calling out that this is a string literal. So if we put a number here, Oracle will kind of automatically recognize it as a number and not care. But when we have strings, we are required to enclose them like this so it knows sort of where it begins and where it ends. So if you go ahead and run this command now, there you go, we can see, I think we might have ran the statement below. So arrow up a couple of keys there. Yeah, and now run that. All right. So now what we can see is, hey, there is a new segment in this table called new tab, which is the new table that we just created, and now we can see, okay, I'm starting to see how this thing is stitching together. And if we were to go down to our next statement, we could see, hey, there's a file ID associated with this segment. So if Koivu, you'll just arrow down to that next statement down. Yeah, and go all the way down to where we get to our where clause. So now we see we have file ID in. And the beautiful part about the in clause is we can just separate the values by commas. So right there where the 8 is, go ahead and put your cursor right next to the 8, put a comma there, and then let's type the number 10. We know and go ahead and run this statement. We know that 8 was the first one that we looked at, and go ahead and run this one. And 10 is the second one we looked at. And look at what we see. The file ID of 10 is associated with the table space of users, which we pretty much knew, right? And then we can see that there's this sample schema users 01 DBF file name that is associated with us, right? That's the actual data file. So Koivu, now go ahead and go back to your SQL worksheet all the way to the right, our new SQL worksheet where we created our table. All the way to the right. There you go. And now what we want to do is we actually want to issue another command to sort of force this thing to allocate another extent, or essentially another group of blocks, right? So I'm going to go ahead and IM that to you. So you'll see an alter table command that I just IM'd over to you. All right, and now let's go ahead and run that command. Perfect. And now we've altered this table. Let's go back to our Tablespaces .SQL worksheet, and then let's run the let's go up and look at our extents query one more time. So just perfect. And go ahead and run that SQL statement right there for Scott. And you can just hit Control Enter. And lo and behold, look, there's 2 of them in here now. So we've got 2 segments, or we've got 2 extents that have been created here for our new tab table. And we can see that there's an increment there, and they're both associated with the same file ID. So we've got extent 0 and extent 1 for the new tab, and they're both in that file ID 10 because, hey, there's really only one data file associated with our users table space. Now, interestingly enough, we have the power to actually, as a DBA, you have the power to work on all of this stuff, right? So one thing that we can do is we can actually create a new data file inside of our table space. So Koivu, if you'll go down there on the bottom left where our DBA panel is, and go ahead and scroll to the bottom, we can see that we have our table spaces here. Let's right click on our user's table space and see what options it gives us. So we can see that one of the options that's available to us is to add a data file. So you can go ahead and click Add Data File. And now we'll see that it kind of gives us this, a dialog box here that's, not particularly friendly. But if you go ahead and click on the SQL tab there inside of that thing, we can see, yeah, it's still not really all that friendly, right? And so I wonder is, okay, is there's something else we could use to try and add one of these things in here? So go ahead and click cancel right here, because when you just look at this thing, it's like, well, it feels like it doesn't have everything I need. So now if you scroll up a little bit on the left-hand side till you go get to our data files. Scroll down just a little bit. Yeah, we just want to go to our data files there. Keep going, keep going, keep going. All right. So if we take a look at our data files there, we know that one of these must be associated with our table space. And Koivo, you can actually drag that sort of left or that right border to the right. If you kind of hover over it, it'll give you like two side arrows. Or we can do that too. You can actually just hover over the data file names. So go ahead and kind of hover. Yeah, there you go. All right, so there's that sample schema one actually. If you go down one data file, Hey, right there is the data file that we saw before, right? Mm-hmm. So go ahead and click on that third data file down, if you would.
This one?
Next one up. Yeah, now just click on it. All right, and now let's right click on it and see what we get. And so now we can see, hey, we can do stuff to this. Let's take a look at our edit functionality. So go ahead and click edit. So we can see, all right, well, we can do some things to this, and I'm not really quite sure what all of these things mean yet, but what's our SQL tab show us? So go ahead and click on that SQL tab in the data file dialog box. All right, and now we see, hey, well, we can do some stuff here, but I'm still not quite sure what's going on, right? And I don't feel all that confident in just adding a data file to the system yet. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this sometimes is just to take a look at the SQL statement that might have been used to create our table space. So go ahead and click cancel right there. And now on the left-hand side, let's scroll down and take another look at our table space. Scroll down, click on users. And right-click it. And we've actually already got this table space open as an object up top, but go ahead and just select edit on this one as well. Yep, click that. And then now we can see, hey, I think I see, I'm beginning to see how I could create this thing. But let's take a look at the DDL all the way over to the right.
What?
The DDL tab, it's all the way to the right. In the edit table space dialog, yep, click on DDL, which is all the way to the right. All right. And then go ahead on the bottom part there, go ahead and click that create radio button. Yeah, right there. All right. So now we can see, all right, here's a create tablespace statement, but it still isn't quite giving us what we need, right? And so if we want to add a tablespace to this, there's actually a relatively simple way to do it, and we could figure it out by sort of piecing it out of these, piecing it out of the SQL that is generated for the add data file statement. But Koivo, I'm just going to go ahead and give you this statement, and then maybe we can see how we might have pieced this thing together. So I went ahead and put that in the chat box. And what I want you to do is just, you can go ahead and close this dialog box. So just hit cancel at the bottom of it. And then let's go to our SQL worksheet all the way on the right where we did our create table statements. All the way to the right. There you go. All right, and so go to the end of that statement, hit enter a couple times, and paste. All right. So now what we see I've got here is this alter tablespace users, and we're actually going to add a data file to it, and then we should have two data files in our tablespace at that point. So go ahead and execute this command by hitting either Control Enter or the play button there. And then we can see, okay, tablespace users has been altered. So now over on the left-hand side, Koivo, let's go scroll up just a little bit and see if there's another data file that's been added to our list on the left. And maybe even and what we'll see is, oh, wait a second, I don't see anything new here. But if you were to right-click on that data files folder, if you right-click on it, you'll see that there's a refresh option. So right-click. Try right-clicking on it. There we go, and hit the refresh. All right. And now what we can see is there's actually another one here, but it'll probably be easiest to notice if Koivo, go right up to where your SQL worksheet is and click on the users tab that is up there next to your, yep, that's our table space. And if we go over and click on the data files tab, which is to your left, yep, and now just hit that little refresh icon, the little blue arrows, and we can see, hey, there's the data file that we just created. So hey, we're all the way down about as deep as we can get with this thing, and we just added a data file to our table space. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to force the system to allocate another extent for our table, but this time we're going to give it a command and tell it which table space to actually do that. So I'm going to go ahead and put this command in the chat window. And then when you get that command, I want you to just put it in the same SQL worksheet. Yep, right there. Go ahead and click that. And hit enter a couple times and paste that in. And, oh, that looks like you got the same command all over again. Oh, yeah, okay. Just delete the top part there. You got there you go, perfect. Yeah, delete that. All right. So now what we're saying is, hey, go ahead and alter this Scott new tab table that we created. We want you to allocate another extent, but this time we're going to tell you specifically to use the data file that we just created instead of automatically deciding where to put it. So go ahead and execute that command.
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead and hit like Control Enter or the play button to execute that command. All right, now we can see that our table has been altered. If we go back to our Tablespaces SQL worksheet and we scroll up to our segments. Yeah, all right. Oh, keep going. We must have another one for, or scroll up, I'm sorry, to where our Scott user is. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and scroll down again. I think we missed what we were aiming for here. Keep going. Yeah, execute that one right there. There you go. Yep. So go ahead and execute that command. We will see at this point now that we have 3 extents, but notice over in the left, to the left of our new tab segment name, the latest extent that we just created has a file ID of 15. So the first 2 had 10, and now this new one has a file ID of 15. And if we go to our next statement down, where we have been entering our file IDs for the last couple of times we looked at this, go ahead and scroll down. And we put the number 15 into our in statement by comma and 15. Now go ahead and execute that command. And now if we take a look, hey, we can see that our first 2 extents ended up in our sample schema users01 data file, and the extent that we just forced the system to allocate ended up in our MYUSER users01 data file. So what we're kind of doing here is just proving that this is not that hard to do if you just kind of start poking at it, right? So now what I want to do is I actually want to show you that we can create a new table space with a new data file, and we can actually use that for our user. So Koivu, one more time, I'm going to chat this over to you. And that command's kind of long. Let me do you a favor, and I'll put a row of stars in here to make it a little easier to tell the difference between where the last command started and the last command ends. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here one more time for you.
From here?
Yep. So now we have our create. I just IMU create table space, and I want you to go ahead and put that over there on your sys on my PDB1 SQL worksheet. Yep. Now you were right. Click the SQL worksheet all the way to the right. So yep, go up and click that tab, the sys on my PDB1.
This one here?
Click the SQL worksheet all the way to the right. So yeah, go right, go right, go right. There you go. Yeah, there you go, where we created our table. And now just hit enter a couple of times and paste that in there.
Okay. I've not copied yet.
Okay. So I put a double row of asterisks in there to make it a little easier to tell where the statement starts. And go ahead and copy that out of the chat window and paste it in here. All right. So now if we take a look at the command that we have here, you can see that we're creating a table space, and we're calling this one MYUSERS, and we're calling out the data file on this to be the MYUSERS users02 data file. And then, you know, we've got some of the kind of default stuff that came along with our other users table space. So let's go ahead and execute this command. All right, and I think probably all you did there is maybe accidentally clicked it twice. So go over on the left-hand side over to our DBA panel, and let's scroll down and see what we have. So go down to the bottom left, DBA panel, scroll down, and if we right-click on our table spaces and hit refresh.
Datafile table spaces.
Table spaces.
Okay.
Right click on those, refresh, and then scroll down. And we can see that that MYUSERS table space is created, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to double click on that MYUSERS table space, which go ahead and do that. And now we can see, hey, there's a data file and everything that's associated with this. So we've got a brand new table space with a brand new data file, and you know, we still haven't burned this thing down. So isn't that wonderful? So here's what we're going to do now. We're actually going to change our user and kind of see what happens. So if you would go over to the connections there on the left-hand side and scroll all the way to the bottom again so we can see our Scott user. So go up to the connections panel. There you go, and scroll down. And then scroll up just a little bit till we get to our Scott user. There he is. And let's right-click on him. And we're going to edit this user. And now, if we take a look here, we can see that the default table space for Scott is users, right? So that means if you don't tell the system what table space to use, it will use the user's table space for Scott. And this will actually, the default for all the users is going to be that. So we can go ahead and click, or we can actually change this, right? So right there where it says default table space on the bottom, go ahead and hit the drop-down menu, and let's choose the table space that we just created. So now go ahead and select MYUSERS. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to make it so this user can log in. So I want you to uncheck the account is locked, and I want you to uncheck the password expired. All right, and there where it says new password, hold on. Where it says new password, I want you to go ahead and put, let's just put, say, admin123 there, or whatever is simple. You know, the password doesn't really matter.
Was it small letters or capital letters?
Use a capital A, admin123. Yeah, it doesn't matter, just as long as we can remember it, and then confirm it in the next dialog box down. And now, before we apply this, we're going to take a look at some of the other options available to us. So if we click that Granted Roles tab, just up to your left about an inch, yeah, we can see, hey, what are all these things? Well, permissions in the database are driven by roles and privileges, right? And so one of the primary roles you're going to need to have is the ability to connect to the database. And if we look right there in the middle of the page, we can see that this user has the ability to connect. That's one of the roles he's been granted. And if you scroll this dialog box down for me on the right-hand side, we can see that there's a whole pile of these roles. You don't have to go one by one. You can just kind of grab the bar and scroll it down. I just want to give everybody a sense of just how much there is, right? So there's a lot of things you can do. But if you're certainly interested in these, this is where you can look to see these, all right? So now up on the top there, I want you to click the system privileges. All right, and now we can see really kind of what this user is allowed to create, right? What sort of things is he allowed to do? So on the right-hand side, if you would just kind of scroll that down again, you'll see that we have a number of different commands for alter any, which essentially means be able to do anything across the whole database, or we have commands that are only specific to an object, right? And so if we scroll up here, we should eventually see the privilege for, say, create table or something like that. So let's just, scroll up, stop right there. And then now let's just scroll it down slowly using the bottom arrow. And so if we scroll down through here, you can see that there's all these type of permissions that can be across the entire database, all schemas or all users. And then there's a number of permissions that are equal to only the particular user. And Koivo, if you'll keep scrolling down, we should see pretty quickly the permissions that are only to a specific user. So right there you see create any table, which would allow us to create a table anywhere on the database. And if we scroll down just a little bit far here, we should see the ability to, so stop right there. We can see right there that this user doesn't have the ability to create a table. We've been creating a table on behalf of this user, but what we would like to do right now is give this user the ability to create his own table. So go ahead and check that box there where it says create table. So go up about maybe 4 radio boxes. The one that says create table, and check that. And now, really the only thing left to do is change the quotas on the table spaces. So go ahead and click the quotas tab up there on the top of this dialog box. And so one thing you'll see here is a user needs to have the ability to use a table space, right? So you can limit how much space any one user consumes on a particular table space, or you can say, hey, you can go ahead and use it forever in an unlimited fashion. So we're just going to take the easy route and check unlimited next to my users and users. So go ahead and click that radio box next to my users. Yep, and now go up to the my users one, which is the second one down from the top. And now what we're saying is basically this user can use as much space as they want to on the table spaces, my users and users, okay? So this is one of the ways you can control how space is utilized on your database, because you can sort of constrain people or box them in, if you will. So now, just for fun, let's click that SQL tab and see what all of this stuff has resulted in. And you can see that the dialog box has gone ahead and written a whole bunch of statements for you. So we're altering our user and changing his password. we're changing his default table space to MYUSERS, and we're changing his quota on the users and MYUSERS table spaces to unlimited. And then we can see that the connect and resource roles are in there, and we've granted the create table privilege to Scott. So now if you just go ahead and click apply, you can see that, okay, this is successfully processed the command. So what that means is we ought to be able to connect with this user. So go ahead and click OK there. And now what we're going to do is actually create a new connection. So if on the left-hand side where your connections are, if you'll just scroll up to where the connection is for my PDB1. Yep. All right, stop right there where it says, now let's right-click on the sys on my PDB1. Yeah, right-click on that connection. Right-click and select Properties. And now we're just going to sort of reuse this thing for Scott. So go ahead and name, and where it says connection name there, just type Scott. And then that's going to be the username as well. It's going to be Scott. And then we're going to change that password to the admin123. And now if we've gotten everything right, we should actually be able to use this user. So let's click the test button down at the bottom there. All right. And so now what it's telling us is, hey, invalid username, password, login denied. That's kind of a bad error. What it's really telling you is you don't have permission to try and connect the way that you're trying to connect. So if we look up to the right there, we'll see that the role is sysdba, but that role is limited to system users. So go ahead and hit the drop down up there where it says sysdba for role. And I just want you to click default. And now let's go ahead and test our connection one more time. So now we see, hey, if we try to connect using the right role, we can actually connect to the database. And now if we click save, we will create another connection, which we can see will show up for Scott. And now we can click connect. And this will open a SQL worksheet for our Scott user. So go ahead and click that, and we'll see that it should pop another worksheet for us here in just a second. Or I guess it didn't auto-magically make us one. If you go back up there next to the blue binoculars up there and create another, yep, go ahead and let's create one for Scott. And now we should get a SQL worksheet just for him. So go ahead and click, yep, go ahead and, yep, click that. All right. Now we can see that we are using the Scott connection for this worksheet. And what I want you to do now is actually create, see if our user can create a table like we said he could. So this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass you a statement here one more time in the chat window. And this will create a new table, just like our other one. So go ahead and copy and paste that into this SQL worksheet. And go ahead and execute this command. Yep, you can just click the play button. All right, so now we've created a table. Now we didn't tell this table what schema to be created in. So what should have happened is the user's default table space which is the table space that we created, should have been used to create this table. So let's go back to our tablespaces.SQL worksheet there. Go on the SQL worksheet where we've been running the queries to see where our data files and everything are. Yep, two more tabs over. Go to the tablespaces.SQL tab. One more. There you go. All right, so now if we scroll up to where we have our where clause for Scott, we can scroll up to the next statement up. All right there, and let's run that statement. So we're looking for our extents here where the owner is Scott. And now we see, hey, we have a new tab 2 at the very bottom here, row 9 in the results set. And we can see that the table space name is MYUSERS, and it has a file ID of 16. So now if we go down to our bottom statement here where we have our in clause for our file IDs, and we add 16 to our in clause, we should magically discover that we have indeed used the data file that we created on the table space that we created as the default table space for the user that we altered. So there you go. We can see that we're using that MyUSERS02 data file. So hopefully, now one of the other things you'll want to do, Koivo, is go ahead and just click the Save button up there on the left to save the modifications to this one. Now you click the Save All there, and that's fine. It just doesn't save them individually. Go ahead and hit Cancel. And you'll have to cancel through all of those. So cancel. Yep. Hit the. All right. So now let's go over to the sys on my PDB1 SQL worksheet and save that one. Yeah. So go over to Yep. Click on that one, and then let's click the Save button here. And we'll just call this one our create table space or something, so we know what we made here.
Is that right?
Yep, that's fine. You can name it whatever you want to. That's perfect. And click Save. And then let's go ahead and click our Scott tab as well, and we'll save that one too. So, and we can just, if you click Save on this one, name it something like tab 2, so we know, hey, this is where we created our second table. So if you kind of work through all of this stuff, I think it really helps to bring an understanding of what's going on in chapter 6. And these are really kind of the examples out of the book. And I'm hoping will give you sort of allow you to sort of wrap your head around the way this stuff works, right? If you actually go through the process of creating some data, some table spaces, creating some data files, creating some objects, we can sort of see how the whole thing ties together using these DBA views. And then we dove into beginning to alter our users, and we'll do some more work on that. But we can see that, oh, we also have control over our users through our SQL interface, and there's all sorts of stuff that allows us to grant specific users sort of specific permissions, so we can give folks what they need on the database and keep them out of harm's way by not giving them stuff they don't need. So that wraps up this week, and we will be, you can go ahead and just click save there, that's fine. We will, you might imagine, assignment 4, which will be coming in the pretty near future. It's going to be based on exactly the kind of stuff that we're doing this week and we'll be doing next week. So definitely take the time to get up to speed and be looking for an assignment based on this kind of stuff to be coming pretty soon. So, Koivo, I'm going to go ahead and take away your screen share here. And then I'm going to just go back to my screen and click the book. And then you'll see, everybody, that we're using, we were doing stuff right out of Chapter 6, and then we also kind of dived into Chapter 8. So if you haven't been reading the book, I definitely highly recommend for you to read Chapter 6 and 8 especially, and then I'll continue to give you that stuff to work on over time. But anyways, that's it for this week. If anybody has any questions, you're always welcome to call me, or you know, really Skype is the easiest way to get a hold of me. It's the one that I see the first before anything else. But feel free to email me or Skype me or whatever, and we can help you out with this stuff. Anyways, if nobody has any questions, and I see it's just me and Koivo here, so nobody has any questions, we will talk to you again next week.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Mm-hmm.